Today I'm going to show you a really cool Hario V60 recipe. It's a method that will give you some really tasty brews with that long, clear aftertaste that you can only get from good pour-over coffee. If you've been struggling with making top-notch Hario V60, then be sure to stick around because I guarantee you that this will help. Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Asa from the Coffee Chronicler, and today I'm going to show you my current favorite recipe for the V60. Even though this technique works really well, it might look a little bit weird. So I'll also go into all the geeky details and explain why this works. In recent years there's been two kinds of dominating schools of thought when it comes to the Hario V60. The stirring, swirling, kind of quick method, and the more slow 4-6 method with a lot of pulses. This technique goes in a completely different direction. Actually, it's an older method that is heavily inspired from old school Japanese baristas. When I started brewing hand drip coffee 10 years ago, this was actually the most common method. Now it actually looks like this method might have a comeback under the new name Osmotic Flow. As far as I can tell, it's a Japanese brand Cafec that has named this method Osmotic Flow. There's a post on Cafec's website where they talk about the method more in depth, and there are some quite interesting and frankly weird explanations for why it works. But essentially it's an old school Japanese approach to pour-over coffee, which is also sometimes called tenseki. I have kind of been rediscovering this method lately and I've been really happy with the results. This brewing method works really well with smaller batches of coffee, which is quite handy because that's where a lot of the other popular methods struggle. So I will suggest using between 14 and 20 grams for Osmotic Flow style of brewing. Today we will use 20 grams and 300 grams of water, which equates to a 1:15 ratio. If you have a good grinder and you use lighter roast coffee, you can also stretch it a bit and use a 1:16 ratio. So just use 18.5 grams of coffee instead and do everything else the same way. So this is up to personal preference. The grind size is my typical pour-over grind size, which is quite coarse. I have a video about it here, which you can check out if you haven't already. To follow this method, you just need basic equipment. So that's a V60, some cone-shaped filters. I highly recommend that you use Cafec's filters instead of Hario's because they're just a lot better. Also, never use the brown filters. They tend to leave a cardboard flavor in the cup, so always use the bleached version. You also need a gooseneck kettle for this method, and it's actually important that it's a good one with a nice and even pour. It goes without saying that you also need proper coffee water, so that's a soft water, preferably with a TDS under 110. Okay, now first you bloom the coffee. This is pretty standard. Just pour 2.5 times the weight of the dose, so in this example it's 50 grams of water. Then wait 45 seconds. Then start slowly pouring in the center of the brew bed. There's no hurry, just focus on the center. Keep the stream of the kettle close to the brew bed to minimize agitation. The idea of this osmotic flow method is to just let natural forces of osmosis extract the flavors. It's important to pour slow so you don't disturb the brew bed. Here it's actually worth talking about the pouring technique itself. Keep the kettle close to your body with the arm slightly bent. This way you minimize the strain on your shoulder and you can pour more precise at the same flow rate. If you hold the kettle away from the body and move it in small circles, you're going to be tired very quickly. When you get to around half the total water weight, then start to pour in a bigger circle around the size of a coin. Instead of using your arm and wrist, you should generate the movement all the way down from your foot soles towards your hips and upper body. Yes, I know this sounds a bit crazy, but if you've ever played sports like golf or table tennis, you know how much proper posture and technique can help you. If you just use arm strength, you'll find that it's very difficult to use one of the bigger electric kettles for this method. Slowly make your way out towards the edge, but never touch the paper filter. Make sure that the brew bed is undisturbed, so don't pour faster than the water is able to drain. It's hard to give an exact number for total brew time, but aim for at least 3 minutes and don't be worried if it takes more than 4 minutes. A sign that you have done a good job is that the brew bed looks like wet sand on the beach. There shouldn't be any silt on top of the brew bed. If that's the case, you've been grinding too fine or pouring the water too aggressively. This is a very good cup of coffee, and I really hope that a lot of baristas really rediscover this technique in the next year. I know there will be some people out there watching this method that will think that it's somehow not a scientifically correct way to brew coffee. If you check the TDS, you can see that the numbers are totally fine, so it is clearly working. It's not so important how or why it works. The important thing is just that it makes a good cup of coffee. If I were to guess about why this recipe is working, then I'd say that the longer brew time combined with a coarser grind size and low agitation, it's just a really good foundation for a successful pour over. All this stuff about maximizing extraction and evenness of extraction, I think it's actually not helping people to brew better drip coffee. The idea of evenness of extraction makes a lot of sense when it comes to espresso, where something like channeling is a big deal. But for drip coffee, I think it's actually a slightly misleading paradigm to work from. So I hope you'll give this method a try with an open mind. If you do, then let me know how it goes down in the comment section. I also have a post on my blog where I talk a bit more about the evolution of pour over coffee. So if you want to geek out, then you should check that out as well. That's it for today. I'll see you in another coffee video very soon.